Baraka Noel is a poet and self-described American hip-hop rapper who's released acclaimed records solo and with the Citizens of Sleep. He founded an artists collective in San Francisco called Merchants of Reality, and he's done stand-up nationwide under the alter negro Warhol Kaufman. Baraka, thank you for being here. I want to talk about your music, and I hope we get into your philosophy, your perspective on quantum history, all that.
Wow, that's quite an introduction there, my friend. Thank you. Thank you for that.
You put out a record last year with the author and Bstep called Hip Hop Equals Religion.
What was the name of that cop I heard about? Ancestors given in misery, lost in the machine of industries and on innocent. Period is coming in like invaders in with all his minions and instruments. Boy, we need a third Churchill in the third world after Winston and Ward, whose words.
I had a religion studies teacher who said something that's been very influential on my view of religion. He said, don't listen to what the adherent claims they believe, just look at the ritual. Like, a religion is only real to the extent that people are bending themselves to it. So when you practice, quote, hip-hop as a religion, what are the rituals?
Well, the cipher is, the other day I was on the street, and it had been a really stressful night actually working, but we got out kind of early, and on the corner there was it was kind of a lot of people. It was probably like 12 people gathered around and some people were rhyming. I personally, I don't really respect an MC who won't participate in the cipher, and I do think it's the ultimate measure of an MC in a certain way. Like when I started out, I was very focused on writing, and that was like, I thought that on paper I could write rhymes that were more technical and more complex than a lot of what I was hearing. But the MC in the moment just going off, I didn't really have a relationship to that, and it's something I've communicated with crew about a lot. So at Oberlin, we started it out as, it was a conversation. It was hip hop as a conversation. And when I was by myself, it was just writing, trying to grasp or reckon with whatever truth was possible, and also trying to figure out how the technique, how I could elevate what I'd heard people do, things that had blown my mind, things that had opened up new styles of thinking or new styles of communication.
You have a new track called Mythos. Quote, I'm a Rodin sculpture, a Banksy bronze up in the Bronx.
I'm a Rodin sculpture, a Banksy bronze up in the Bronx, with a brawn playing ball in the park.
Madam Curie with the needle in her arm, charming Cobain with a cursed smirk and drawl and a ball of cocaine. I'm Miles playing prior and pool, but the cue is a tune from some neon light the Cotton Club wanted to use. I'm your forgotten dub from a 97 club, makes you dug out the dumpster when Buster was young. I'm the crust in your lung, I'm a busted rung that was hung up by Bailey and Barnum, bar none. I'm Umia's pardon, I'm Don Pardo introducing Biggie just before the turn of the century. Really, I'm a bucket Questlove busted in Philly while thought was twisting the Philly blunt, you feel me, bruh? Confucius fuming opium beside the Parthenon. I'm the Pantheon, abacus beads made of ceramic. Uber wise first words causing hysterical and panic. Nigga manic, then tap shoes, JG Levitt discarded, getting harvested by Gregory Hines and saving its mind, getting retorted. I'm the artist formerly known, before he was blown. I'm cool more long after he's grown. Who am I?
Who am I? There's a legacy tracing going on in there.
It's partly a response to, I believe it's already the Rugged Man. It's a song called Renaissance 2.0. And it's a track that's really stayed with me, and I haven't really ever known even like necessarily remember the title or like who's on it. I'll just be like, what is that track? I got to find that track again and let it go back to it. And he just,
if I ain't better than Big, I'm the closest. I'm Richard Pryor before multiple sclerosis. I'm beef, I'm gold teeth, peace. Mantronic, stetsasonic, symbolic, bambada, so sonic. I'm traded chronic, melodic with logic, Islamic, or poverty, profit, economy, robbery, cock it. I properly drop it. It gotta be honest, the opposite of novelty, rocket. I Herbie Hancock it. I'm honest, throwing your gun. I'm funky 4+1.
ah, dude, his claims in that song are so. They're so grounded in the music and the sound, like it's believable because it feels right, you know, the way Freddie Gibbs, when Freddie Gibbs comes on the track, you believe what he's saying because he's representing it so straightforwardly. But also, like, there's a magnetism and a poeticism in the way he builds the concepts. And so I was definitely, I had this night, it was one of the first nights I was in Portland. And I won't get into the whole thing, but basically I was biking home, and I had some music in my headphones, and I hadn't been freestyling, and I wasn't intending to even rhyme necessarily. I was just trying to go to a space inside my head, but then it started rhyming, and I freestyled pretty much the whole way home, like biking. You know, I'm a Rodin sculptor, Banksy in bronze, up in the Bronx with LeBron playing ball in the park. Who am I? And it was just so fun, you know, to play that game. That I just did it for a while, you know.
And the way it sort of pivots to the verse is really cool. Like, you kind of keep going with the same structure, something like I'm Madame Curie with her needle.
With the needle in the arm. Yeah.
But it's pitch shifted down at that point, and then it keeps going on in a different way.
I'm a Rodin sculpture, a Banksy in bronze, up in the Bronx with LeBron playing ball in the park.
Madame Curie with the needle in her arm, charming Cobain with a cursed smirk, control and a ball of cocaine. I'm Miles playing Pryor and Pool, but the cue is a tube from some neon light the Cotton Club wanted to use. I'm your forgotten dove from a 97 club, makes you dug out the dumpster when Buster was young. I'm the crust in your lung, I'm a busted rung that was hung up by Bailey and Barnum, bar none. I'm Umia's pardon.
I think it's interesting, though, that song, because I didn't even think it would really work as a song necessarily. I wrote it down, and then it's not end rhyming. It's all of these internal rhymes of lines that the sound doesn't really return back on itself. And so I kind of thought that it was more of a spoken piece, but I just don't have spaces where I thought about getting up. Like, I thought it was really funny, actually. I think it's funny getting up and spitting that at a comedy mic. No one in this town would like really respond to that. It would be funny to me, especially because other people wouldn't know what to think and would just be confused.
I want to talk about your stand-up later, for sure, but while we're on the craft, can you tell me about the sampling process? You've sampled Washed Out, Radiohead, Soul, various Soul that I don't know. There's a layer of semiotic meaning given when you choose a sample. Like it's referencing back to something, but you're recontextualizing it. You've said something along those lines to me before. Let's continue that conversation.
So I have to say, first of all, yeah, the sound of my production when I produce, it's not mine at all. You know, I don't own it, and that's why I don't try to charge people for music. It's an invitation if people want to donate because something in the work is like they respond to it. That's wonderful, but I love sounds. I love the sounds that I've heard, you know, and I love hearing new sounds that draw me out of myself in the way that familiar ones have also. And so the process of trying to claim what I've heard, especially, I always thought it was interesting with CD players, as they get scratched and like jump every so often in my life. I've heard that the scratches replicate vinyl in this rhythmic, like, incantation that it's a lot of times it's random, but sometimes it becomes its own conversation, and sometimes I've just heard that and wanted to claim that and
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, gunshots rang, we was unarmed and the cops came. Oh yeah, oh yeah, them shots rang, we was unarmed and the cops came. Ain't playing, these are not games. Goddamn freaking Nazis. Oh yeah, unabashed in our demolition, fascinated, place blame like the devil did it. What more to say? Abhor the way we torture, our warlords get nurtured. Society seem unnatural. Fuck your capital punishment. I ain't buying it.
back in the day, I don't think this exists anywhere really, but there was I didn't really have the proper equipment even. I was trying to figure out, and I don't right now either. I was trying to figure out what to use, but I just heard the Primitive Radio Gods. They have a B.B. King sample in their most popular song. I think it's called "Standing Outside a Broken Phone Booth with Money in My Hand." And so he's singing, he sings a bunch of stuff or whatever. But then every so often, it's a great song. I love this song. Every so often, B.B. King comes in and he just goes, "I've been downhearted, baby. I've been downhearted, baby. Ever since the day you left. Ever since the day you left. I've been downhearted, baby. I've been downhearted, baby. Ever since the day you left." And it's just that stayed with me my entire life. Basically, from the first moment I heard it, I've been going back to that song. And so eventually, when I was trying to figure out how to record at home instead of having to find a way to get someone else to do something for me, I recorded that on like a vocal recorder. I just like the most decayed. So it's already kind of a decayed sample, and there's nothing about it that retained even the original quality of the sound. But I just had a rhyme on it, And so then I think it was just a freestyle. Honestly, it was one of the first tracks that I recorded into the MRS. I had a multi-track recorder called MRS.
At a certain point, you became insanely prolific. You were recording a song a day, right?
Yeah, we sometimes more. It wasn't always. They weren't really fully formed in the way that you would want as an artist to really release a song and hype it and perfect it. It was more that we were exploring. Or for me, I was exploring rhyme and sound and trying to figure out even what worked. It was an interesting question. Like, we thought about the Beatles a little bit, where it's like, back in the day, they had 4-track recording. They would just get in, there's 4 of them, they got 4 tracks, and they lay them down. And that was it, And so it seems like it's possible sometimes to step in and out and just let it go and have something powerful happen. And so we were trying to figure out what will last. We'll make a bunch of tracks. We might make 100 tracks. We might make 1,000 tracks. But in a year, when we go back and listen, which ones are interesting? Which ones work? And so I went the other way too, where I would sometimes get lost in the song and try, especially early trying to produce. There's some weird music on there, man. Just trying to figure out what elements of percussion are necessary and what is interesting to listen to and what sounds good going into. This, you do this with me too. You might get lost for 3 hours and just slightly tweaking one sound, and then come out of it, and maybe even that sound doesn't even make it into the song.
Yeah, I don't just record shakers when I'm building a percussion track. Here in my living room, I hold my wrist at a certain angle with a certain tightness, and get the right tone out of the shaker and everything. Yeah, and then I fade it down in the mix, and you can't tell.
And then for me, I might come back, I might go into it and just, there's something about that I want to share with people. I would just want to hear anyone else hears it similar, you know, and then might come back to it and it's like, that was crazy. I mean, I sampled the Archer DVD, the intro, just the intro sounds on one of the Archer DVDs, and it in no ways, it's not even particularly musical. It was just something that it was on for long enough in the room I was in that I just thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna rhyme on this. And I wouldn't really say it's particularly entertaining, but it's definitely an element of an experience that I had, and so I value that as an idea, as a concept, you know.
I think of you as someone who's totally committed to the craft to the point where it can become wildly impractical to get it into an audience's ear hole. Like there's this quote in Dying the First Time. It's said in a sardonic way. Above all, know your audience. Like, can we talk about Warhol Kaufman? Your stand-up, you have a sort of, I mean, that's this medium where you have to directly interface with the audience in this very give and take.
You would think that. You would think that would be the case, but it's actually not necessarily as true as it seems, because it's essential, I think, maybe. At least when I was starting, I definitely thought it was necessary to have a defense against the crowd. And there are people who don't have that, you know, and who can make that work, to just be completely vulnerable and just be loved. But most of the comics I know talk about it, and even other performers talk about it basically as gladiatorial combat. And it seems like grandiose, maybe, but people are pretty concerned, if not afraid, about standing in front of a crowd, or even worse, in front of almost no one, and with, like, armed only with a microphone, hopefully, you know, a sound system that will amplify your voice, to be able to hold that attention. As an audience, there is some kind of an empowerment in the crowd to try to tear the performer down if they've told you in advance that they're going to make you laugh. Because it seems like fun, and no one has to take it seriously. It's very casual. And so other comics have different feelings than I do, because I came out of hip-hop. So in terms of heckling and all that stuff, like, I kind of have a different experience. But even, especially as a road comic, you know, going to places where you're not necessarily welcome, and then you're outnumbered, and everyone has glass objects and is kind of intoxicated and probably has been working like 40 hours a week and just probably a lot of times wants you to shut the fuck up so they can try to have sex that night. You know, they're not even interested. And then it's amazing. So, like, yeah, I like that art form. It's still exciting, you know, even in an empty room or a full room, it's still exciting.
It's weird. Life is, like, it's weird being black in America. Like, we never get invited to auctions anymore. Just some observation. I can't get a job, you know, looking like this, and like I really want to, but like I tried to apply to the Ku Klux Klan and I couldn't fit my resume on one sheet. What a cool world. I used to live in Oakland. They found a human head in the recycling plant 2 blocks from my house, which is messed up because that's compostable. How's this for a segue? I saw a white lady fall off a Segway. Did you know the fire department has a boat? Yeah, you did already. I was surprised when I found out. Oh, how's this for a fun prank? Next time you see a cop, ask them why they're not a detective. They love that so much. When I was in Oakland, I saw this billboard. It said, starting salary for cops, $80,000 a year. Wow, that's a lot of money to kill black people. I didn't realize. It's decent.
you definitely approach it sideways with this sort of Mitch Hedberg like way where you'll just like keep going with these jokes that are not resonating. I've seen and where it's, you know, like you have this, I think, kind of cynicism towards the ritual of entertainment, where like you're choosy towards the audience, like you don't.
I think it's not cynicism. I think that it's almost like it's wonder. It's still to have some, despite all the evidence, you know, and despite everything that I maybe should know better, to think that finding a way to do the craft in a genuine and connected, at least internally connected way that at least attempts, if not succeeds, to expand on what's already being done. I think that's wonderful, you know? And I want to say, like, for example, I was in a club briefly, you know, I stepped in and it was the end of Rob Schneider's set, and I really just wanted to go in. I tried to, like, let me just buy my way in. And they were like, you know, it's almost ending. The guy at the door, he's like, it's pretty much ending. I was like, I don't even care. Whatever. Like, let's do this. Like, how much? And he's like, no, you know, this is what you can do. This is what you can do. I shouldn't do this, but here you go. You can stand up by the curtain and you can look through. And, like, we could hear him, you know, because he's amplified. He's like, just if someone has to come through the curtain, you have to, like, step back, but it's okay. It's almost ending. I was like, all right, man. So we, like, stood up against the curtain and we're listening to Rob Schneider. And I'm thinking about, you know, he's actually an incredible actor. He's so undervalued because the skills that it takes to do comedy aren't necessarily respected. But then if you flip it, you know, there's a movie. I even hesitate to say what movie it is. I'm just going to allude to it and say that there's a film. It's a very silly film, but Rob Schneider gives one of the most interesting dramatic performances I've seen, and it's impressive, you know.
Does it rhyme with schmoosh schmigolo?
No, that's not the one I'm thinking of.
No, I absolutely agree that it takes a lack of ego and a total commitment to, especially to inhabit like a goofy comic persona, like someone like Jim Carrey, who I love, and I love in his purely comedic role. It's like he you know, he disappears into it, and
well, that's
even if he never had it
now 10 years later. But like, if you think about before Eternal Sunshine, no one was trying to give Jim Carrey a dramatic role. He was one of the biggest stars in the world at the time. He was the biggest star in the world. But like, you know, even with the Cable Guy, you know, he proved that he can. You know, it's kind of amazing. And honestly, like with Chris Rock, you could say Chris Rock on the stage, when it's his word, he's standing in front of you, he will eviscerate whoever's around. He will completely control the room. You know, I've never seen him live, but he's amazing, right? But you see the movies, and through the lens of Hollywood doesn't necessarily know how to respond to a voice like that. And so there's so many other layers that go into feature film that, you know, that one perspective doesn't necessarily carry.
Yeah, and you, on that note, I think that you always, sure, other people like make your beats, but you always seem to find a way to put yourself out there in an unfiltered way on your own terms.
I don't take direction very well. It's something that is generally understood, I guess, with people who I've collaborated with, and that's true. I do like to collaborate. I really like to add as many perspectives, and the way that we always work as a crew is like everyone has to be excited about this, or we don't. If everyone isn't into it, then that's not, you know, something we can claim.
Let's completely pivot. I want to talk about your views, or at least a view you had at one time on quantum and the multiverse. In your book, Dying the First Time, you said, quote, "I believe, as do many physicists, that every decision made by particles in our universe splits reality and creates a branch in space-time. I also believe, which may be insane, that we can choose to travel at these moments of branching to other worlds outside of any known dimension?
I have trouble placing that project in terms of, people ask, like, what kind of writing is it? And I always say it's a quantum memoir because the things in that book did and didn't happen as just the way of things in the universe. And so I'm never really sure if it's fiction or not. It's like, it obviously is and isn't fiction, I guess.
It's very much an internal monologue for most of it, but there's this framing device of you being in a car with this woman 27-year-old woman whose name is redacted, and it says she's called the suspect, and there's this tension about whether you two are going to hook up, which is sort of like a quantum thing.
Well, that was a wild time, man. Oh my goodness. So I would say that the concept of quantum theory, which I recently had some kind of a argument, I guess, online with someone who claimed that, without the formulas and without the math, why am I even talking about quantum theory? And I'm like, well, because I leave the math to the very skilled mathematicians, and I trust them. And I'm interested in the philosophy. But so, okay, there's something I've been thinking about, and I don't know how possible this is to articulate, but I would really love to share it with you, because it gave me a lot of hope the other day. And I really used to struggle with concepts of mortality. If you think about the multiverse in terms of Schrodinger's cat and the dual possibilities leading to potential dual outcomes that we certainly won't be entirely present for, the piece we were referring to before is called "The Time Traveler Forgets His Past as He Enters a New Future," and that was an idea I thought was powerful. That we all time travel constantly, and we're all traveling through universal existence. But if you enter a new reality, you won't remember the old one because we're created and destroyed every instant. But so what I was thinking at the bar is that if every choice splits off multiple options, you could argue at any time that we may be in peril. Like, people can experience accidents that are fatal any moment. So we could die any time, and that's scary to some people. But every time that you come to that point of potentially dying, consciousness is life. Consciousness travels forward through life. So there's a possibility that you die, in which case you will not be conscious of that outcome. That other people around you will be conscious of it because they're still living, but you will not. The other option is that you don't die. Something comes close to that point, but instead you live. And in that reality, or one where you almost died, you lived, you're still here. And so you can't die. Your consciousness can't die. And up to any point in the future, all you're going to experience is living, the living option. And I found that really hopeful.
Yeah, hope in the absolute finality of death. Like, absolute. It's such absolute extinguishment that it's sort of like not even worth considering. And is that kind of what you...
Singular perspective, It's an egoistic approach to not having to fear mortality. The living option.
I'd like to think more about this kind of perspective as it pertains to you and your life. You went to Catholic school.
Oh man, yeah.
In this universe, you went to Catholic school. How would you be different how are you different in a universe where you didn't go?
There's this moment, I guess, in my childhood that I haven't totally thought about too much, but at a certain point, my mother started taking me to church, and it had to do with she met my stepdad, and once they got together, it was something that was important to him, so she was down. She went along with it, And so I don't really know. I mean, I went to religious schools before that. I was at a Lutheran school, and like even in preschool, it was a Lutheran preschool. But the religion didn't really factor in on the same level, I feel like. I didn't even really understand. Honestly, I was confused. I went to a Lutheran school, and I really mixed up Martin Luther and Martin Luther King Jr. because, like, they talked about both of them, but not much about either one, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like, who is that? That's a guy. I don't really know what that is. And in the Catholic school, it is more of an indoctrination that kind of happens. It definitely, there's a darkness to it. I mean, I don't really feel like anyone ever talked to me about hell, you know, too much before Catholicism, where, like, they really want you to know about hell. Like, you really think about hell. It's not even like, I think some religions, they talk about how great heaven is, but Catholics don't even really focus on that. Like, trust me, it's better than hell. That's how good it is. Which is kind of great, I guess. Thank you. But it turned out, I found out when I left Ohio for the summer and like went to the West Coast for the first time, and I was just kind of doing my thing or whatever. And I talked to my mother at one point, and she revealed that she like never believed in God. That, you know, she said, I wanted to give you the option. That's how she always put it. Like, I think kids should have the option of religion. So she like, and that really messes with me actually. Like, I started to have all these questions of mortality. Like, oh, I already had trouble with these ideas of like the infinite, and it was just, couldn't see it. I couldn't really believe it. And I thought it through it, you know, even at a certain point I was like, you know, this is at Oprah, and I was like, you know, Greek mythology, we look at Greek mythology and, like, we look down on it. Like, how could you think that that's how things work? But, like, honestly, it's not so much crazier than the Christianity story. It's pretty much, they're both some wild claims. But now, thinking through it, the universe in terms of quantum, I kind of have started to think that Greek mythology, those stories are kind of complex. Like the concept, I talk about this sometimes, like Michael Pollan writes about vegetables, about plants, and how they have manipulated humankind and function essentially as viruses. They propagate themselves using people, marijuana, alcohol. These are presences that spread themselves through our reality based on manipulating our consciousness. And so that idea of like Mount Olympus, where, you know, in one realm, marijuana or love or, you know, wine, which had a god in its own like manipulated presence in Greek mythology, on one realm we're just drinking the wine, but on another realm, like who knows what consciousness is, you know, who can really claim anything about what intelligence exists just based necessarily that we can't communicate with it. Orson Scott Card has a series where he writes about that called it's like Xenocide is one of them. It's the Speaker for the Dead series, and he at one point there's a virus that they realize is super intelligent, and just they don't have a good way to talk to the virus, so the virus is killing them, and they attempt to find a more nuanced way to communicate with the virus so that they don't have to just murder it, you know? And we do that as people too. It's like, I don't understand you. You're wearing a hoodie. I'm afraid I'm going to stalk you and murder you because we can't communicate. I can't say hello. Instead, I have to like resort to other means of communication, you know?
Yeah. There's a jazz musician from Seattle, Evan Flory Barnes, who I'm probably going to have on the podcast, who, after Michael Brown, he sort of like gave up trying to communicate with people and was like, it would just be like, what does the situation really need? And he started hosting these just get-togethers at cafes for anybody who wanted to come, and just created this. It wasn't like a place to sit down and talk about police brutality. It was just getting people who are attracted by that energy somehow to just sit and communicate and be
present in public and share perspectives and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it really kind of scares me when people on the internet get these self-reinforcing, these tunnel visions of different sort of communities and political splinters that have like their own networks of news and blogging, and like people start existing in sort of alternate realities in terms of their whole narrative of what society is. That splintering is really it feels inherently like it contains destructive power to me.
This is kind of dangerous territory, but when the whole street harassment conversation kind of went viral online, and it was something that was being very virulently spoken about, which doesn't seem to be happening so much now that I've seen. But I was just interested in a potential distinction between public discourse and harassment, because I value public discourse, and I think that the ability of citizens and individuals to share ideas in the street, in public, is not only like a First Amendment right, but it's like one way that we are potentially able to defend ourselves from various acts of violence, whether they're spiritual, public, or private. Because if we communicate about what's going on, like, for example, like domestic violence is something that's been traditionally silenced and not spoken about. It's like whatever they're doing in that house, we don't talk about it. But there is a value to transparency and to like open communication. And if we can separate that from stigmatizing people's choices unless there's absolute harm, and then, even it's a question of what's absolute harm, well, that's why we have to talk. That's why we have to be in public communicating with each other about what's going on, so that we can understand. And I think that's valuable.
It's a sign of civic health. People need to certainly feel that they can communicate in public and have that basic sort of trust with the people around them. People's ability to self-censor is quite powerful. Go on. Also, I'm okay. On a more, I know what you're talking about on a very intimate level. I had an alcoholic. Well, my father was an alcoholic, and he fortunately quit 21 years ago. So, I feel good talking about it because it's gone so well. But the whole culture of alcoholism, which is much like abuse within families, is just sort of not talking about it.
Yeah, I mean that.
And once you even talk about it, it just starts. It doesn't even have to be a huge intervention. That's what happened in his case. But once you even just talk about it, it starts this germ forming.
Is dangerous, on a certain level, because honesty has the potential, especially, if you want to trace it in one direction, there's a quote that I think about a lot, that behind every great fortune lies a crime. And so it's like, whenever you are building, especially over contested land, whenever you're building a society, you're building it on top of something, and on a certain level, you're building it on top of like the bones and the graves of whoever came before, and that's not necessarily something people want to think about. So, if you have something that's stable now, usually you don't want to go back and dig up the foundation and figure out what's buried underneath of it. And so, the search for discovery and truth can be threatening to power. It kind of inherently is threatening to power, especially when power corrupts. So, I was thinking, though, on a more hopeful note, people always talk about entropy, or maybe just some people talk about entropy around me sometimes, and things do fall apart. But that's one element of a conversation, because also we build, and there is growth that is the mirror side of that. Things grow, and from death comes life in this ongoing way. And we were sort of on that before, the regenerative and hopeful power of the ongoing cycle of living. And so music functions like that. Samples return like that. You know, that's one of the reasons I love vinyl, because there's this circularity to the process, and it's real. There's a direct physical correlation between the tactile element of the record and the sound that comes out. And I've had some nights, you know, around 3 a.m. in a long session where I've recorded vocals into the needle of a record player just because I was so amazed that that was even possible. We use whatever we need to, though, you know what I mean? It's kind of great. Like, I love the people play with buckets, you know, outside of dances. You know, there'd be, when I was a kid, you know, the middle school dances, there'd always be people with 2-liter soda bottles just like hitting them against the floor and the walls to play go-go rhythms outside of DC. So it's like, that's some of the dopest drumming I ever heard, was just like plastic.
Yesterday I was recording percussion for this album I'm working on, and a snare is just too loud for the record, and I got blisters on my hand thwacking the arm of my couch.
See, like, honestly, I've recorded into speaker wires, you know what I mean? Like, where it's just like, I need to record something right now, and I have this 1/8-inch cable on one end, and on the other end it's RCA. And
are you claiming that you screamed? Wait, you screamed into a 1/4-inch cable and it registered the sound? What are you saying?
I've done that. I've recorded into the headphones. Plugged on the mixtape Philosophies. One of the tracks, it's called Best in the Game. It's an Oberlin producer too, Tom Orson. But I went to his dorm room and recorded my verse into his headphones that was plugged in to the mic outlet, and that's like the sound. I love that track too, actually.
Like me, most of the time, sometimes I get very, like it's multi, I'm confused. You just get right into it, know everything, because you remember all.
Never be the best in the game. Spit to feel less, stressed and insane, to express and relate. I may never be the best in the game, but yo, when I'm etching the page, something stretches my brain. Can't help it if I happen to be the most attractive MC. Why the hell are you attacking on me? Last night I collapsed to my knees. Try to cease, it was tragic, comedic. Can't sleep, but I actually need it. When the angst receding, would you hand me a Kleenex? Country's looking for a woman, a man that could lead it past a present president, simp for narcotics. Managed to lock up niggas handling product, cause they're stranded for dollars. Thought about it, can't dismantle the logic. In the dark, hope for the glow of a lamp with a spotlight. Spark up, smoking dope, demanding stardom. Lapping at a bottle, inhaling marijuana. Sharing fungus, staring at the vapors of ganja. Hip-hop transcends the vagueness of concept. Takes on substance, I feel a real bond with something ageless beyond this. Yeah, something ageless beyond this.
We just use whatever's necessary, man. That's actually one of the lines from Mythos Beta, too. It's like, I'm a bucket drum, Questlove busted in Philly, while thought was rolling a Philly blunt. Who am I? I love that, man. I love that sense of, like, you know, okay, so for example, Chevy Chase. Chevy Chase, I've heard stories that Chevy Chase broke his leg so many times doing his acts, falling down on SNL, that he even, like, and I don't even know how this can be true, because it was only a year, so it can't, like, how many times could he have broken his leg? But I heard at one time he broke it, and he did the whole rest of the show with a broken leg, and he didn't go to the hospital until after they finished shooting. Which, that's kind of the model that I've always seen of the performer who sacrifices everything. And I question that now, man, after, like, seeing the results. I can't vouch for it, honestly, but there is a romanticism to the mysticism, I think, that we kind of fall for. And that's why, you know, people make jokes about Amy Winehouse, and I, you know, not that I never have made an Amy Winehouse joke, but I have a reverence for Amy, you know, because she gave herself so completely to the craft. And, like, people talk shit about Lauryn Hill, and I've seen Lauryn Hill live, and I've waited hours, you know, and I've been in situations where it felt like I was in a refugee camp waiting for Lauryn Hill to perform. But like she
No pun intended.
is so, no pun intended. Oh my God. Honestly though, like she's like, she gives herself so completely to the crowd, the way that like even when she demands from her sound engineer, but she demands from her band, you know, she demands from herself. Like, you know, I watched that movie Whiplash. That's a total example of like this sense of trying to completely give oneself over to not even being a person, to just exemplifying the craft. And it's not perfect, you know? It never is perfect, but like where it breaks sometimes is the most precious, you know?
Yeah. A quote that I wish that a hero of mine had said is, "Only creators have the right to destroy." I've been attracted to the idea of chaos magic, the idea that any time you create something, it is true, kind of like what we're saying about just dialogue or what the country's built on. You have to be willing to understand that you are like destroying something and at least own it and be responsible with that. And in that same sense, in something like Whiplash, he's like destroying his previous self and creating this jazz legend who he wants to be.
And that scene too, where it's like you've already gone so deep into the abyss that like you just have to manifest on your own terms whatever is going to be present. Yeah, I thought that was really powerful. You said something about old magic, and I think about a Tom Robbins quote. I have a lot of I kind of issues with Tom Robbins because when I read his books, a lot of the perspectives, I find off-putting, you know. But
yeah, I've read one of his. It's the one about the guy who gets a voodoo curse put on him.
Like, he's a good storyteller, you know? He's, like, hella able to tell a good story, but sometimes it's not the story for me. But he's talking about old magic and, like, magic versus magic, with magic, magick, versus, you know, magic, sleight of hand, and, like, the showmanship on the one hand. And then he referred to, like, the other magic, like money is an example of old magic, where it's not real, but it manipulates completely. And that is powerful. Doesn't, you know, it's not necessarily qualitative, but there's power there.
I experimented with sigil magic, which is a form of chaos magic, ICK. With my hymn project, Gathered Hymns of Hayden Loss, where I put out a hymn once a month for over a year, and I'm going to do another batch after this break. But each month I'd put one out, and they're supposedly old hymns that I found by this guy who died in World War I, but I actually wrote them. And there's different artwork for each, with his face on the front, but in the corner, faintly, I put a sigil, which is like an icon that you have imbued with intention, and it would be something about how I wanted my life to go, or how, you know, I wanted something good I wanted to happen for my girlfriend or whatever, and you put the intention into the sigil, and there's different ways of, quote, charging a sigil. And just as an experiment, I did it with each hymn. There's a sigil that people are kind of subliminally taking in and supposedly charging with the emotional energy that they are having from the music as they listen to it and glance at that album cover. And I have to say, they all worked.
You know, there's something.
I'm sure it's maybe some kind of self-hypnosis, but it works.
I was doing more performing, like stage performing of my writing at a certain point to where, like, this is a natural, like, technical desire to write, but then I wanted to have more work, so it was kind of like, I got to find stuff to write about. So what I started to do was to write pieces that were specifically speaking to one person. And it wasn't like for an audience in general. It was like, I want to say what I need to say to this individual who like isn't necessarily even named in the piece. And I would not even necessarily be, you know, in contact with the person and share the work with them. But there's this power that I felt from that. And not every piece that I've ever put together functions as a spell. You know, in a way, like I would say a successful joke is like a spell. There's some power in the repetition where the impact is consistent and it's reliable, you know? There is something that comes from directing the attention in that way, whether it's like it's to this specific audience, it's to this room that I'm in, or it's like to a theoretical universal audience because the most powerful jokes might have the potential to actually work every time. That's like the most elusive joke, the batting 1,000 joke that never ever fails. And Monty Python talks about that. There's like the funniest joke in the entire world that is so funny that if you get to the end of the joke, you will die laughing. So, and like the person who wrote the joke died at the end of the joke, and everyone since who sees the whole joke dies. Some people will just get a little piece of the joke, and they might be in the hospital for months, but like they could recover potentially. And like that power of the act of speech that's replicable, and that infinitely, like, you know, you hear the joke, you have to tell someone else. Like you watch SNL in the 90s, you go to work, you have to talk about it. And like, even like sometimes you've heard it already, like someone might tell it to you and it's like so good that you have to go back to the source and just drink from the source again. You know, I mean, that's so interesting. And I think that's why Mitch Hedberg is so great, because he distills his work into just the most essential elements. And then when he presents the work, he doesn't even support it. In general, he doesn't, you know, you can watch a lot of comedians who try to sell their material, but he never really, until the very, very end, he never really tried to sell it. He just presented the work, and it functioned on its own or it didn't. And I think that's so beautiful. It's so powerful.
Wow. Yeah, you said a lot that I completely agree with about chaos and intentionality. I think I've had songs that are spells that I have that feel very qualitatively different to me. The most intentional of them. Like I had a song in high school called Sweet Sorrow that I wrote as a commitment to never kill myself. And
that's dope.
And
oh man.
And it's just like I still feel like I'm in that quantum universe that song asserted.
You know what, man? There's a while when I was in San Francisco, and I just started having night terrors, and it was when I was with Amelia, and it's not like we were actively trying to have kids, but I was just thinking about it, and I would get really freaked out with like what could go wrong, just thinking about all the things that could go wrong, and thinking about like miscarriages, and just like I would go to sleep and I would just see like these images, and I didn't know what to do. And I had this piece that was like a meditation on kind of like on love and family and like ancestry and lineage and future and my relationship. And it became an incantation, you know. I would just repeat it to myself. There was a time when I went out into the streets and just like I would walk and chant and like really like shout like this incantation. And
you got to charge the sigil. That's what they say.
Dude, I would walk counter to the societal order of the streets in order to like encounter the power that's like beyond society, that society is trying to order, the chaos. I have spells. I mean, in that piece, The Time Traveler, there's spells that are introduced, spells of randomness, because out of chaos comes order. And so if you put in if you put order into the universe, always chaos will respond in equal proportion. Therefore, I figured logically, if you put randomness into the universe, some order will come out of it. And so sometimes when we needed things to happen, we would choose to just be chaos, and we would just run in incoherent directions and speak gibberish in order to manifest some order that we needed, you know?
Wow.
It,
Cool. I want to ask you a question that it comes from dying the first time. The question: if everyone awakened clear head and of sound mind, where would it leave our city?
You know, it's such a funny thing for me thinking about that, because now a lot of that chaos is being taken out of San Francisco, actually. You know, and
yeah, I was just there.
This question, right? Like the question of gentrification, you know, at this point, I don't think it's a surprise. It's not that anyone's surprised. You know, it's happening. It's happening everywhere. It just feels like a surprise when it happens where you are and you experience it, your own complicity in it or your own relationship to it. Like I've noted that gentrification has been ongoing anywhere I've ever been my entire life, and so like that's led me to sort of acknowledge my own relationship to it. That it's obviously we have some sort of a connection.
Yeah, when I was in San Francisco last, I really felt I recoiled at this, I don't know, this lack of wildness in the people. Like it felt so like
the lack of, say what?
A lack of wildness. It felt like I don't know, people.
Oh, I know, it's so sad.
People felt so like tame. And like just the activities,
the art is not in the streets
and it
anymore.
was like fun. It was like it was fun. But everything seemed like pleasure oriented. Like there's a mini golf place that's kitty corner from my sister's apartment where I was staying, and there's like just all the restaurants. Everyone put so much energy into food and stuff, but it's not. But like, what about the the chaos magic energy? What about like disruptive energy?
Too.
Like. I don't know.
That's like the journey that I've been on, sort of in a correlation where it's like, oh yeah, the cycle of money. Let's pay attention to where the money's going and where it like gathers up, and we can get close enough to it that we can get like a little bit of it for ourselves.
More so than in rock, which is my background. In hip hop, it seems like people like have lists. Like, do you have a list? If I asked like your top 10, top 5.
I got some lists, yeah, I do. But I'm very careful too, because it's like you got to choose your category, right? So like if you're looking for the greatest MC, right? There's different categories. There's greatest MC of all time. You know, that's one MC. That's a difficult, conversation. But then if you want to talk about the illest rhymer, like I would say, no question, MF Doom, it's inarguable. MF Doom is the illest rhymer if you just trace the rhyme, just follow the rhyme. And I think it's really interesting, like talking about the archive of the record. I love tweeting. I've been informed apparently that tweets go into the Library of Congress, and that archive is really interesting to me. Fucking Ice-T made a documentary called Art of Rap, and that was big. One of the things that it did was it brought rhymes out from the beat, where it just had masterful MCs speaking directly into the camera with no microphone, just speaking their rhymes. And I thought that was really powerful. And there's a few artists like you could point out Kanye and Eminem, people who like have not always once they really got famous and really got successful and got money, have not always retained the technique as the value that they might have seen it to have earlier in their career. And I witnessed them. They both like knew that they were on record, placed like side by side with some of the greatest MCs of all time. And they felt so strongly that they like, you could see in their eyes and hear in their flow that they were like fighting for it again. Something I love about Kendrick Lamar is that he brought that out of Jay-Z, like, for the Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe remix, like Jay-Z came back into the ring and wanted to throw down because there's something that happened that's so large, you know. And I mean, that's why I love Jay Electronica. That's what he pulls out. So, actually, a few years back, there was a... What were you going to say?
Top 5 illest rhymers.
Top 5 illest rhymers. Okay, so, like, MF Doom, Pharaoh Monch. Pharaoh Monch is, like, the way that he constructs the sounds is just insane. Raekwon does stuff with sound that's completely transformative. At this point, Black Thought's going on like all my lists. You know, he just inhabits the list. He's incredible. And I think I gotta go with A$AP Rock. Like the way, just for the rhyme, he will find rhymes. And there's a contingency on this list because honestly, I still have to draw a line at content. Like people who don't get lazy, people who like hold the technique up as like the highest form of what they're doing, as opposed to there's other people I can name who they potentially have that potential to deliver on that level, but they don't necessarily follow through on it, or like it doesn't seem like message factors in to their communication, so it's like more technical sometimes, or like they abandon the technique entirely. There has to be this confluence, this golden mean of how, and I'm not saying that I always find it, you know, between like in a song, between the mix is important, right? Between the subject matter, the execution of technique, the originality. People talk about the originality of the concept of the song, or just the originality of the application of the techniques, you know? Nas has this track where he tells a story backwards, and he writes a whole rhyme where he's telling a story that happens in reverse, like you're listening to the song in reverse. And that blew people's minds, partly because they're just like, dude, how did he even think to like do that? But apart from that, it's just like the way he delivers it, you know? It's so masterful. Matt the Ace likes to do concept rhymes where he'll tell a story, but he has one called Soda and Soap, and it's like, I think 2 verses. One verse, he is using brand names from soda, and one verse from soap, and he's telling stories that way. Or like, you know, Raekwon, the GZA. The GZA has a record on Liquid Swords where he does labels. He's like, you gotta read the labels, and he's using different names of record labels to talk about how shiesty record labels are and people in general and snakes, and it's just like it's pretty powerful. I mean, one of the things, you know, about black communication is this coded language. Saul Williams comes into that, you know, thinking about falsifying a narrative, claiming that you found a narrative, you know, and then reinterpreting the presentation in that way, or just the manner in which concealing some element of truth can reveal it, and like the subtext of wordplay, you know, there's a lot of power there. I got a lot of thoughts about that, so it could just kind of go off and off.
No, I think that's great. You have such a huge body of work. If someone wants to start getting into Baraka Noel, where should they start?
Oh my goodness. I mean, my website is kind of designed to lure people in, and hopefully they'll get lost. So my website is barakanoel.com. There's a lot of videos on YouTube, youtube.com/Baraka Noel, BARAKANOEL. There's a lot of music on the Bandcamp. I'm going to try to clean it up and get rid of like a lot of the weirder stuff. Probably, if I can bring myself to do it. This new project that I'm working on with my crewmate from Sons of Razi, called Ibn Zikr, and that will be out, I believe, fairly soon. I always put stuff on my website, so that's probably the simplest way to like check out what I'm up to.
Baraka Noel, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, dude, it's such a pleasure, man. I will talk to you soon, dog.
Talk to you soon.
Peace.
Peace.
A little dewdrop, focus on the two, cause the two night. You ain't gotta shake your booty.
Wanna eat a smoothie.
A little dewdrop, everybody focus on the two, cause the two night. You ain't gotta shake your booty. Do that.
Wanna catch a movie, the smoothie, I'm all wanna eat a smoothie, watch a movie, I'm
I'm very Schneider. Yes, I know.
A little dewdrop, everybody focus on the two, cause the two night. You ain't gotta shake your booty.
Yes.
We should have been chilling back in preschool. Let your little brother be too. We should have been chilling back in preschool.